Hi, we're having a conversation with Dr. Robert Higgs, and the conversation is about the war on drugs. How does the war on drugs affect regular people in the streets?
It affects them in a variety of ways. First of all, they have to pay for all the expenses the government incurs to carry out the war on drugs, and that's a great deal of money. Large police forces, surveillance forces, military forces are employed in connection with the war on drugs, and the public has to bear all those costs. But in addition to that, the public has to endure the conditions that are brought about by the conduct of the drug war, and that is in many places the worst consequence of all. We all know that in Colombia, years of war were associated with the attempt to prosecute the drug war, in large part because of pressure from the United States government. And now in Mexico, for the past 4 or 5 years, a great deal of violence has taken place affecting ordinary people. The violence is not simply combat between rival gangs or cartels. The violence spills over and has caused the death and injury of tens of thousands of ordinary Mexican people. And this is a tragedy. Of course, all the people who were affected by the war in Colombia are an even greater tragedy. But this is the worst consequence for ordinary people, is that they may be caught up in the violence. Now, in the United States, which is the country I know best, the war on drugs has had the terrible consequence of almost militarizing the police forces of the country. Because the local police receive federal funds to give them more incentive to cooperate with federal authorities in prosecuting the drug war, they have been equipped with almost military-style weapons and other equipment, and they have conducted many raids on incorrect addresses, which resulted in the deaths of people in those homes. So the drug war has had in the United States a terrible consequence of increasing the severity of the police state. And when the police are able to act in that way, this is a terrible misuse of police resources. Police should confine themselves to finding real criminals, people
like
who murder or rob or commit other crimes, because drug use is not really a crime, but only made a crime by law. It is not the kind of criminal activity that the police should be involved in to begin with. And when they are involved in it, as they are in a very big way in the United States, they cannot be using their time and resources to capture real criminals. And so the criminality of American society is increased by the government's attempt to stop traffic in drugs.
And considering these effects, some of them tragical, why is it that the war on drugs is so popular?
That's an excellent question. Some Americans, and I suspect some people in other countries also, believe that drugs are bad. They believe it's wrong, it's harmful for people to use drugs, and they are willing to have the government use its coercive force against people's conduct which they merely consider bad, apart from whether it affects anyone other than the user. Sometimes those of us who oppose the drug war refer to drug crimes as victimless crimes. They have no real victim as such. People choose to use drugs, to possess drugs, to buy and sell drugs. There is no harm imposed on any unwilling participant. The harm takes the form of effects that grow out of the illegality of drug trafficking, all of these murders and robberies and other crimes associated with drug gangs and drug traffickers and occurring as a result of disputes between gangs, these are all things that would be criminal normally. We don't need a drug war to make killing and robbery illegal. Those things have always been considered wrong and unlawful. But what has happened is that because of the drug war, these real crimes have increased in magnitude. And of course, when they do, they affect many innocent people who have no connection. They simply happen to be in the wrong place.
So just to clarify, ending the war on drugs does not mean no prosecution for crimes committed under the influence of...
Not at all. The use of drugs should never be an excuse for the commission of a real crime. Never. Just as the use of alcohol should never be an excuse for the commission of a real crime. And when the law is carefully administered, it operates that way. But the legal authorities in the United States have almost combined drug crimes with real crimes in a way that makes it possible for the government to prosecute more people and fill up the prisons with offenders. And this has been a tragedy. It's been a tragedy for the United States, but a greater tragedy for the other countries that have been pressured by the United States government to cooperate with the international drug war. And it will be a blessing for humanity if the United States changes its policy in making these drugs illegal, as it changed its policy in 1933 of making alcoholic beverages illegal. All historians recognize what a tragic episode prohibition of alcohol was in U.S. history, but not enough people now recognize that an even greater tragedy has grown out of the attempt to prohibit the use of and commerce in drugs.
And speaking of incentives, you mentioned incentives a few minutes ago. The incentive for the cartels is the high price. What is the incentive for politics to go with this war?
Politicians have benefited by catering to the demands of elements of the public that favor the drug war. Such people exist, and politicians have been able to buy their votes by carrying out the drug war. So there is some incentive there, but once the drug war had become a big undertaking, the government had at that time built up a whole complex of activities, massive police forces, other agencies like the Drug Enforcement Administration, extra activity for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, extra activity for the military services, and all of these things have connected with them money that is spent to supply these forces. So it brings in people in the private sector who sell goods and services to those who are carrying out the drug war. And in addition, because the drug war has caused such an enormous increase in the number of people in prison in the United States, it has caused the growth of the what's sometimes called the prison industrial complex, by analogy with the military industrial complex. Enormous additional construction of prisons has taken place in the United States. There are now more than 2 million people in jails and prisons in the United States, and a substantial proportion of them are there for drug offenses. So the people who make money from building prisons, from operating prisons, from working in prisons, are all greatly in favor. And the police all across the country are greatly in favor because, as I mentioned, they have been able to receive a lot of additional money from the federal government to divert themselves away from the pursuit of real criminals and to the conduct of the drug war.
And any idea of how can other countries escape the pressure to keep the drug wars?
I know it will be very difficult, especially for any small country, to resist the pressure that we know the United States government will bring if a country attempts to remove itself from the cooperation in the international drug war. It would be an act of heroism by local political leaders if they were to defy the United States in this respect, and it would be a great benefit to their own people. Unfortunately, the political leaders in many small countries, and in Latin America in particular, have themselves been made participants in the drug trafficking and have benefited from it, and have allied themselves with cartels, so that it has become very difficult to look to the political apparatus to rescue the public from all the harms that have come from the drug war. The people who would least want to see the drug war end are the cartels, because their very existence depends on the illegality of drug use and possession and commerce in the United States in particular, which is the great market for these products. So I know that any attempt a country might make to remove itself from the international drug war would certainly be resisted by the cartels wherever they have some influence and power, as they do in many places, and it would be resisted by local politicians as well, even if they understood that it would be a great benefit to the mass of the people in their countries.
Finally, if a student comes to you and asks Dr. Higgs, where could I learn more about this, what would you recommend to begin with?
There are many good sources of information. I'm affiliated with an organization called the Independent Institute, and our website has a wealth of information available online and available in print form about the war on drugs. So I would say visit the independent.org website, and you will easily be able to find very good research, very good news analysis and commentary about the drug war, not only in the United States, but in many other parts of the world.
Thank you, Dr. Higgs, for sharing these ideas with us, and thank you too.